Welcome to Meadowlarkers 68. Kate Fagan is here. I'm Howard Bryant. We may or may not have Amin El Hassan coming up, but he's supposed to be here, so we will not count him out just yet. We have a good documentary to talk about today.
Oh yeah.
It's called Nothing Lasts Forever. Director is Jason Cohn. It's airing on Showtime right now. Before we get started, we will just go very quickly with our honorary captains for today. The number 68 offensive line territory. Kate Fagan is, there's not a whole lot there, so I'm going to switch
Smiling.
gears. And I'm going to go with the year 68, which was not just the year I was born, but one of the most tumultuous years in history. Very important year. You had the Tet Offensive in 1968 in Vietnam, turning point of that war. You also had, of course, the tragic deaths of Robert Kennedy and MLK. You also had lots of protests, 1968, Tommy Smith, John Carlos, 1968, Mexico City Olympics. You also, of course, in baseball, not controversial, but the year of the pitcher. Bob Gibson, 22-9, 1.12 ERA in the National League. Denny McLain, 31-game winner. Last 30-game winner in Major League Baseball history.
Wow.
All of that, and it was the year of my birth.
The only thing I was going to be able to contribute, but you got to it very quickly, was RFK. That was it. And then you blew through that and moved on to other things. So I look forward to when we get to 81, the year of my birth.
The year of your birth, 81.
I look forward to that.
Yes. And not to short the numbers, we're just going to go with one. Number 68, we'll go with Jaromir Jagr, the great
Okay.
Pittsburgh Penguin. I don't want to call him a Boston Bruin, but he did play for the Bruins and played deep into his 40s for virtually every team in every country. But, shout out to the great 68. And on we go. So the De Beers slogan is "A diamond is forever." We've all seen these commercials. We've all been told that the most important thing in the world to supplement your love or to reinforce the love that you have for your significant other is a diamond. That is not necessarily the case in Nothing Lasts Forever, which is, I really enjoyed this documentary, Kate. It's an 87-minute essentially meditation on diamonds, but also on fraud and the evisceration of myth that diamonds are actually rare. The story is really about the De Beers cartel. As we know, they own the diamond industry. But there's an existential threat in the industry, and that is synthetic diamonds. That technology now allows you to create a diamond that is virtually identical to a diamond that comes out of the ground. What does this mean for the multi-billion, trillion-dollar diamond industry? What does it mean for love? What does it mean for authenticity? What does it mean for the story of what a diamond is supposed to mean? There are people in this documentary, such as Stephen Lucier, who's the president of De Beers, who tells you that everything is at stake if synthetic diamonds are allowed to exist. There are other people in the industry who say you're already being had because the diamonds that you're buying are not the diamonds that you think you're buying. And then there are the real cynics out there who say it's all bullshit anyway. What were your thoughts, Kate, on this?
Wow. Well, I had a lot of thoughts. First, I'm going to back it up about a month before, because this tends to happen in life, Howard. Like, well, for example, once you learn a word or a phrase you'd never heard before, inevitably somebody uses it in a conversation within a week of you learning it. In the same way, one of my very good friends was buying a diamond for her wife for Christmas, I believe. And that was the first time I had heard that synthetic diamonds even existed, because she was debating whether to get her a synthetic diamond or a real one. And I had like one follow-up question to this, like, oh, there's synthetic diamonds? And I just kind of blew past it. I understood for a split second that synthetic diamonds were sort of a thing we were making now, but I didn't investigate it until sitting down to watch this doc. And I learned a lot, because you just said the De Beers, the diamond cartel. If you had asked me what De Beers was before this documentary, I would have said they're a company that sells diamonds. I don't think I would have known that any company had exclusivity on the diamond market in the way this film portrays De Beers as having, to the extent that it is either proven or insinuated in the documentary that De Beers has billions of diamonds that are held off of the market in order to keep the price point of diamonds high and the rarity of it a driving point of the marketplace. These were all
to
things
keep
I
them
didn't
valuable.
know. Yeah, and throughout the doc, and I thought, one, from just like a stylistic point of view, the doc goes to many different locations, and that was interesting to me. There was style in the doc in terms of the landscapes it was shooting and the places and the ways it was interviewing people. But more than anything, there's a moment in the doc where I think it was, do you remember the woman who they interviewed? The only woman who basically was the heart and soul of the documentary?
Yes, Aja Radin or Rodden.
Rodden. She says that outside the diamond industry, nobody knows what's happening. There's the common consumer doesn't understand that there's bazillions of diamonds, that they're not that rare, that synthetic diamonds are infiltrating the diamond market, that De Beers is a cartel. Like, we are just unaware of this entire world. So being able to have like an inside look at a world that is, yes, it's about diamonds, but as I'm sure we'll get into here, this whole entire story seems to be a metaphor for, or we can take that logic and we can apply it to so many different things inside the sports world and outside the sports world. But what it made me think about the most was why I make the decisions I make. Like, for example, right now I am sitting in my new office. You can't see, listeners, but my backdrop is different than it has been for the first year of Meadowlarkers, because I was waiting on a desk from West Elm, and it took, as everything does right now, 7 months longer than it was supposed to. But the reason I bring this up is because I have always wanted a Herman Miller Ames desk chair, a rolling desk chair. And you can go for $150. I can go buy a knockoff of a Herman Miller Ames desk chair. And yet there was something, because I've wanted this desk chair for years, I just wanted a real Herman Miller desk chair.
An authentic Herman.
Yeah. And no one who walks, very few people are going to come up to this office to begin with. The people that do, if I had a knockoff Herman Miller chair, one would probably not even know what a Herman Miller chair is. If they did, would probably think it was one. So what am I doing that for? And I think that was the question, one of the questions at the heart of this documentary was, does it matter if the story that we've built around something is real? Does it matter if something is quote unquote authentic, if it is indistinguishable from a product that might cost you a fifth of what the quote unquote authentic one is?
Yes. Can we have a personal conversation here? Just the two of us, Kate Fagan.
Just the two of us.
Just the two of us.
Yeah.
I have you ever purchased a diamond for someone?
Yes, I have. But look at me, I'm defending myself right now. My wife and I, we purchased them at the same time. We went into a store together and we picked out the ones we wanted to commemorate our upcoming nuptials. So, but
why diamond?
I just never even considered a different way to memorialize it. Right? It was never like, well, maybe we get, I can't even think of something, a necklace, maybe
an emerald, a different stone.
I didn't even think of a different stone. We didn't get traditional diamond engagement rings. I have a black diamond and my wife has a flat diamond that doesn't look like a traditional diamond. That was our way of like, a tiny bit of
rebellion.
Yeah, because I understood the kind of, it's a very heteronormative, just to use that phrase, like, and this doc actually laid, I mean, the essence of this doc, certain of the men who come on, is about the story that men are supposed to buy diamonds for women, and that almost like the diamond is men are placing the value of the relationship in the diamond, because it almost feels like they're not going to be offering other emotional relationship support. It's almost like it is the money in the diamond that provides the value of the relationship. So I understood
and
that.
The expectation.
Yes, but I was still, that cultural messaging is so deep. I didn't grow up wanting a diamond, but once the time came, I was like, well, what other way am I going to commemorate this relationship? What about you?
That's right. The diamond industry is one of the few completely unregulated industries in the world. And it is the Wild West. And this documentary showed that as well. I knew that ahead of time because when I bought my wife her engagement ring, not only did I buy her engagement ring and go the whole diamond route, but when I was working on my first book, Shout Out, A Story of Race and Baseball in Boston, I was researching the history of Isidore Muchnick. Isidore Muchnick was the Boston city councilor who was trying to force the Red Sox to integrate by revoking their permit. Back in the day, you needed a permit to play baseball on Sundays. And so this was a huge threat to say, and back in the day, Major League Baseball teams played Sunday doubleheaders, so you were losing, two, really big important games there, right? So he was trying to threaten the Red Sox by saying, hey, we're going to revoke your permit unless you give these black players a tryout. And that's how Jackie Robinson got the infamous 1945 tryout with the Red Sox. In trying to track down his heirs, I found his daughter, Fran Muchnick, who was actually working in the diamond industry, and she was living in Tel Aviv at the time. She's since passed on. And that was also happening at the same time I was preparing to propose to my future wife. And so she gave me all kinds of information about, all the different C's, the carat, the cut, the clarity, the color, and of course the cost. And my wife, Veronique, was from, she's Dutch. So we go to the Netherlands and I decide to surprise her. And I go to Antwerp, which is one of the diamond capitals of the world. So I hop on the train and I go down to Antwerp and I buy this diamond for her. And it is one of the most bizarre experiences ever. They just, it's like in the movies, this guy comes out and he rolls out this lovely piece of velvet and they just start pouring all this ice. Like, it really is like in the movies. And you look around and you see these people and they're walking around with like attaché cases with like thumb cuffs connected, and then there's the bodyguard at the door and he's like laying there. And I notice he's starting to take a nap because it's around lunchtime. He's starting to doze off. He's got an Uzi in his coat.
Wow.
I was like, that's a submachine gun. I'm like, holy shit, like where am I? So anyway, the answer is yes. I bought the diamond and it was a huge, huge experience. Not only was it a huge experience, but at the time in 2000, it was a lot of money. It is still to this day the most expensive piece of jewelry I've ever purchased for anybody. And all of these things in this documentary challenge this ritual. They either challenge the ritual or they support the ritual. And you just said the same thing, right? When we go to this point, when you feel like you want to spend your life with someone, the very first symbol of that life spent together is the diamond. And then here we go watching Nothing Lasts Forever. And I sort of enjoy the cast of characters. One of the things that this documentary does a really good job of is it does have characters. In each character, they found the perfect characters to sort of represent each position. And I love this because there was let's go through the characters. You already mentioned Ajaradin, which was one. There was Dusan Simic, the Serbian guy who I really loved. He's the voice of the wilderness. He's the voice in the wilderness. He is the guy, he is the gemologist whose motives are pure at first. That he's realizing that this industry is being corrupted, that there are synthetic diamonds in labs that are being made, and those diamonds, those fake diamonds, are being mixed in with the pure diamond pool. And just for anyone wondering out there, the difference in the price, if you pay $8,000 or $9,000 for a diamond, a synthetic diamond is $800 or $900.
Yeah.
And so it's a big deal changing the price in this. And so he's the voice in the wilderness. And so he tries to go into business. He tries to create a system that will differentiate so you can tell if your diamond is corrupted or if it's a pure diamond. And he finds out that nobody is listening,
Right.
that nobody cares in this industry. And then he sort of, as we'll let you go on, he begins to sort of make his own turn to the dark side.
Yep.
Then there's the woman that you already brought up, Asha Radin, who I
If
absolutely...
we can pause on our
Yes.
Serbian guy, though, for a second.
Yes.
Because...
How did he get to be driving an Uber?
Well, this is what I was going to bring up, is I love there's that like kind of 2 to 3 minute segment of the doc where he's driving an Uber because he's in between, right? He hasn't yet committed to his dark side turn where he himself is going to go make synthetic diamonds and sell them as real, I assume, although we never get to that point. And he's past the point of creating his system for how to distinguish between the diamonds. And he starts
because no one's listening.
No one's listening. And as you when he makes his presentation about how he's going to do it, it is a self-selecting system. It can't actually identify the diamonds. People who make synthetic diamonds have to treat them so that going forward you can identify them. And like that is the core of the problem, is anyone who makes synthetic diamonds wants them to be treated like real diamonds. So no one's going to self-select into undermining their diamonds. But so the driving of the Uber thing was just so fascinating to me, because I think we've all been in an Uber where our driver is the most fascinating person you've ever met. Like I've been plenty of Ubers where my driver was, like a musician who used to tour and was the guitarist for one tour in the 70s for Led Zeppelin. And then and you just are, I have had some of the more fascinating conversations in my life with an Uber driver.
That's right.
And I've often thought I should drive an Uber every once in a while, because you just, as a writer, you learn so much about people's behavior.
Well, that's right.
The stories they tell, you can mine them for characters. Again, that word mine. So I really like that little tidbit that
so much
one of our main
going
characters.
On right now.
All of the mining. So I really like that little Uber driver bit, because I'm sure, Howard, you have also ridden in an Uber with somebody whose story is fascinating.
And also a chilling meditation on the gig economy of what capitalism is doing to all of us.
Yes.
Asha Radin was terrific as well. I don't know if I'm pronouncing her name Radin or Radin, but I'm going to go with either one. Asha, if you're out there, I apologize to you. She was the jewelry designer / journalist. You really don't want to meet before Valentine's Day. She is the myth buster in the whole story. She is telling you that the origin story is bullshit. She's telling you, something I did not know, that the diamond itself is not rare, that there are diamonds all around the world. And that I had no idea about that. She will tell you that the diamond industry is already completely corrupted by synthetics, that you're not getting what you're buying. But then she also reaches another point. And the other point is, but what's the harm? If you think it's valuable and it feels valuable and it gives you the feeling of magic that it's supposed to give you, doesn't that still make it valuable? And that's her position. And that position buttresses very nicely, very interestingly, with this guy, John Janik, who I thought was hilarious, the Salt Lake City synthetic diamond maker, who is like, all of this is corrupt. No, and you can tell he's just trying to take down De Beers. He's like, this whole thing is wrong. And he talks about the time he bought his fiance, he proposed to her and she was completely underwhelmed by the diamond he got her because, quote, it wasn't big enough. And his whole thing is that diamonds are just rocks and you're really just being had, and the whole thing is not what you think it is. I actually sort of liked Stéphane Lussier, the president of De Beers. I got to admit, Kate, I liked him because I do believe, and maybe I'm just, a softie on this, I do believe that there is some certain ritual and there is a certain story about love and authenticity and it is heterocultural symbolism. All of that is very, very true. And, is it very, very dangerous to tell a 6-year-old girl, that the very first thing in the world you want more than anything else is a diamond and a husband? Yeah, all that stuff is really toxic. But I did think, in watching this, when we were talking about the rest of it, even the guy Chandu Sheta, who was the diamond mixer in India, who was like, I mix these diamonds because I can't afford one. I polish these diamonds for a living, and at my salary, I'll never be able to buy anyone I love one of these things. So there's a lot of class element into this, and the real question to me was really one of fraud. And there should be something. Is it harmless? No, it's not harmless because people go into bankruptcy to buy these things. They really, I mean, how much of your disposable income at that time when I proposed to my wife, to my fiance, that thing was a pretty good percentage of my annual. I wasn't making a lot of money as a reporter at the Mercury News, and that thing was,
Yep.
$7,000, $8,000. And so
And
it does matter.
where did we come up with the whole like 3 month salary? That in De
Exactly. And the
Beers?
formula that you have to, that this diamond
Yeah.
is supposed to cost you a certain amount of money for your love to be real.
Yeah, that I don't know. We don't really know the origin of that. Maybe we can Google it before the end before the end of this episode, because it doesn't touch on that formula in the doc. But like that was top of mind for me because it seems like it goes hand in hand with the story creation of De
Yes, with the Belgian
Beers.
myth, right?
Yeah, with the origin myth um and the to your point about Lucier, who was the De Beers representative, president of De Beers. One, did you catch that he was from Schenectady, New York, my hometown? So that was a nice little local connection. There was something about him, like I don't know if you got this vibe that, yeah, he was a company man, but didn't you think he almost was, as he was seated for that doc, his energy was like he knew the whole thing was bullshit.
Yeah.
Like there was something about the way he was engaging where he was like, I know I'm a storyteller. I know that all
Well,
of
I
this
think
is
they
just
were
thinly
banking on that,
veiled.
that yes, that we are
Yeah.
not, what was the line in the thing? We're not selling you a diamond, we're selling you an idea.
Yes.
We're selling you
Yeah.
here as an idea. And that idea exists very, very deeply in in our culture. And I love the guy Martin Rappaport, who's the diamond merchant in New York, who is like, look, if this idea disappears, we're all out of business. We're all going bankrupt. We're all finished. All
Right.
of us are finished if people no longer believe that diamonds are the ultimate symbol. We're done as an
Yep.
industry. This is
Yep.
the existential threat. It's not even the existential threat isn't even the fact that there are synthetics out there. The existential threat is the public knowing that these things aren't valuable at all.
Right. And our girl Aja, who we're Rodden,
Yeah,
she has to me she had like the most incisive quotes of the entire documentary because I wrote a few of them down. Like at one point she talks about De Beers and she's saying they created an illusion so spectacular it turned into truth.
yeah, yeah.
And also she makes the point numerous times that a lot of things, she says, a lot of things start as a lie and have a way of becoming true. But why would you want a synthetic diamond if a real one wasn't valuable? So it's
That's
like
right.
the not only is the diamond itself hinging on the fact that we believe there's value in them, but even the submarket of the synthetic diamonds are hinging on the fact that we would want a real diamond and that
That's
it's like a
right.
step on the ladder of capitalism and love and whatever
And
wherever you want to
value.
associate on value where you're but if a diamond itself isn't real
And
is
who
not
wants
isn't
to?
real isn't real who wants to knock off
That's
you
right.
know of that diamond I really was to try to connect this doc with another kind of zeitgeisty piece of content, even though I hate the word content, is I thought a lot about are you watching The Last of Us? I mean, who isn't watching The Last of Us, the
I
show
am
on
not.
HBO?
I'm not a zombie guy.
I'm not a zombie person either, but the world building and the characters are so good. But there's numerous moments in The Last of Us where they may be traversing an underground tunnel at some point to get from point A to point B to avoid some of the madness up above. And under in that tunnel, there might be a section of rooms where like a kind of nursery kindergarten had popped up where there's toys and they're trying to teach kids and it's all in this underground bunker and you get the sense in those moments that because this apocalypse has been happening for decades that there are kids who were born and grew up and this is where they went to school and this was life and your mind can't help but spin and think, well, obviously I think that that is depressing and lifeless and a sorrowful existence, but if you grew up and that was all you knew, then you probably wouldn't feel the same way. And in a parallel to this stock world, I often am thinking, I can't, if you go far enough back in my mind, I can't untwine, or whatever the word would be, disentangle.
Decouple.
I can't decouple whether I actually believe that a diamond makes sense to represent a relationship or not, because it is so deep.
Yeah, it's so ingrained.
It is so ingrained that, like, I can't even come up with an example of what I would do to commemorate a relationship other than that.
So
And
I have,
yeah,
go ahead, Kate.
nope, that's it. That's the end of it.
I have a guy, one of my dudes who I love. He's hilarious. He cracks me up. I am not a jewelry person. I just don't. It's never been my thing. I had an earring in my ear. I took it out about 10, 12 years ago. It's gone. And that's it. Now, I've never worn rings. I just don't wear.
What about
jewelry.
a watch?
That's where we're going. That's exactly where we're going. And the watch, historically, there are certain pieces of jewelry that have always been sort of status symbols. And my friend is a Rolex guy. He loves Rolexes. He's into the Rolex. He is into the Rolex as an investment. He is into the Rolex as an investment beyond that. If you look up the numbers, it performs better than the stock market. It performs as well as certain land. It's an investment. Even if you have to wear it, but they're appreciating in value. And I said, I don't wear watches because it's not about being a watch. It's about owning a Rolex, not for the status symbol, but for the appreciation. And I looked it up, and it is true that the Rolex appreciates at an incredible rate. And I was like, who cares? It's a friggin' watch. And so he was telling me, and this is what reminds me of this, is that Rolex has like a 2-year waiting list for a Rolex watch called the Batman, which I'd never heard of. I'm like, what are you talking about? What universe are we in right now? So supposedly the Rolex Batman has like an 18-month or 2-year waiting list, and that the supply of the Rolex, very much like this documentary where they talk about controlling the supply of the diamonds, that Rolex will never flood the market because it maintains the artificiality of the value. The value stays high because you cannot get them, which goes to the emotional purchase. The reason why this is valuable is the exclusivity of it. And it brings me to another documentary that I was watching about the Bernie Madoff collapse. On Netflix right now, where they talk about how everybody wanted to be part of Madoff's exclusive fund because no one got invited to be part of it. And if you were one of those people, he made it feel like you were such an insider that you were really, really, really special. And so the emotion that goes into having these things, whether it's the diamond, whether it's the Rolex, whether it's the Madoff thing, all of this is rooted in your emotional connection to your idea of exclusivity and value. And so where the existential threat here is in this doc, which I really, really enjoyed about it, is what happens when that ingrained idea that this is something you must have no longer exists.
Yeah. And even as you're talking about different industries, whether it's watches or diamonds, one of the ones that I live in frequently is the sneaker industry, which has a similar MO. I mean, Nike knows that it can only release a certain number of certain shoes for the same reason, which is the whole point of it is that we only have 1,000 of those in the market. And that the end result is that the cultural currency of having them and the cultural currency that reflects back on Nike is invaluable to them compared to making 10,000 of them and selling all 10,000. It's like, it's a long-term bet that if people are coveting and building in some ways synthetics, right? You've got all people, I mean, all across the country, you could get knockoffs of a Travis Scott or people like the Shoe Surgeon who build them from the ground up. All of that is all part of what ends up making an authentic Nike more valuable, which you see in this diamond doc. De Beers starts to realize. And if I can make a quick parallel, right? I couldn't help but think as we're watching this doc, and for the first half of it, becomes very clear that De Beers is working overtime, it seems, to keep synthetic diamonds off the market. Like they see them as a threat. They don't want, supposedly, they don't want them in the mix. People should stop making them, etc. And then at some point, they must realize that it has hit a tipping point. There is no keeping these synthetics from the market. Therefore, we must embrace them and market them ourselves and create a product line for De Beers. And they did that, right? The light box where you can
That's
buy
right.
these synthetic diamonds. And I couldn't help but think about the NCAA and Title IX, because they did a similar parallel move the NCAA did, where it's like for years they were like, Title IX could be a death knell to our men's college sports. Therefore, we're going to spend money to keep Title IX from happening. And then at some point it reaches a tipping point and they're like, actually, we can't stop this from happening. So let's own it
We got to
and
co-opt it.
regulate it ourselves. So there was like a lot, we could make a lot of parallels to the sports world, not that we need to, but there's that moment in the doc too, Howard. I don't know if it stood out to you, where your guy, John Janik, is talking about the history of aluminum, a material that is you can find anywhere for you can roll it up and you can store your leftovers in some aluminum foil. You know, it is a ubiquitous ubiquitous element. And he tells the story of how the National Monument in DC, when they were building it, aluminum was incredibly rare. They hadn't yet perfected whatever scientists do to create a method to like mass produce it. And so the very top of the National Monument is
The
made
Washington
of aluminum.
Monument?
Yeah, the Washington Monument is made of aluminum. And then a couple years after that happens, aluminum becomes easy to make and now proliferated everywhere. And no one would ever think of aluminum as representing something
Now you would make
rare.
it with diamonds.
You would make it with diamond. And I don't know. So one more quick story is that here in Charleston and probably in other parts in the South, the history of the pineapple is really fascinating, because in the late 1700s, throughout the 1800s, pineapples were incredibly rare and expensive to get. You'd have to import them. And for a number of years in Charleston, you would rent a pineapple for a dinner party to have as the centerpiece of your dinner party. And, you know, whatever it reflected, same thing as diamond, like exclusivity, wealth,
Status.
and status. And as you walk around Charleston today, you'll see a number of homes that have like a pineapple, like as you walk in the front gates of somewhere, there'd be two pineapples, like there could be, you know, two lions or something that are made out of marble or whatever you would make them out of, because of that history. And so it's always interesting in moments in time where something holds some insane amount of value that when we look back in 2023, we're like, how could they have ever thought that? Which leads me to wonder if in 50 years we will be using diamonds like we now use aluminum. Yeah.
Yeah.
Not if De Beers has anything to say about it.
Well, that's right. And I'll tell you what made me think about this was the idea of surrender. And in watching this documentary, I was thinking from a sports metaphor. I was thinking of the military. I was thinking of the post 9/11 sports world with all the flags and all the flyovers and all of the induction ceremonies before the games. And the fact that all of that wasn't real. And the fact that it was the military that was paying these sports leagues. It wasn't Bob Kraft and the rest of or Jerry Jones, you know, joining the war effort because they were really concerned about America and they were supporting the troops and the rest of it. It was a business deal. And so when you're watching this, you go, oh, you know, look, there's a homecoming and this person is meeting, you know, it's all staged. And I remember thinking that this is a fraud. This is not right. This isn't real. And then I had somebody say to me, well, okay, the Wisconsin National Guard paid to have that homecoming ceremony prearranged. And they paid the Green Bay Packers $80,000 to do it. But to that family, that reuniting is real. And to the fans watching this, it is pulling on an emotional heartstring that is also real, even though it's staged. So what's the harm? And I take huge issue with this. If it's real, then you don't need to stage it. If your diamond is actually of value because it comes out of the precious earth, then that should make it valuable. If it's not valuable, if in fact you can buy a diamond the same way you see sand on a beach, then that changes completely. So there is a harm. So when I listen to the cynics, the Ashas of the world and the John Jennings of the world saying, well, it's all bullshit, and if it means something to you, then it still means something. No, I don't agree with that at all. Especially if you're going to charge me $6,000 for this.
Yeah.
And so I was not of the mind in watching this that if it still carries emotional value, then it still has value if indeed what you're looking at is not authentic at all.
Well, yeah, because you can't rewind time. The reason I might think it has emotional value is because I was fed, told, messaged that it had actual and capitalistic monetary value, and therefore it stood in as a representation of something else I thought or you hope will be valuable, which in this case is your relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And that was something I thought about throughout the doc was I don't consider myself somebody who understands economics at all different levels, right? I get the broad strokes of capitalism, but I'm like, well, where in the idea of capitalism exists this concept of at one point diamonds maybe were actually quite rare because we didn't have the mining techniques. I don't even know if that's true. I'm just saying it's possible. But
that
now
perhaps there was an authentic scarcity.
Yes, at some point. But now we are in a place where, according to Asha in this documentary, there are enough diamonds in the world for everybody to have one and have a billion left over. So where does that fall in this idea of capitalism? It's not as if there's an honest market and there's a number of them, and then again, it's not me being naive. No doubt all of this stuff is regulated according to how the industries want them to be regulated. But I'm like, how am I supposed to think about the value of something when it kind of is still rare because you've locked them in a room somewhere? So I can't
It's the Rolex. It's the Rolex thing.
Yeah, or Lamborghini only makes 80 of a certain Lamborghini so that they can charge, $250,000 for it. Like, this question of value then does come down to the story that is told around it. And that's
exactly the point, right? They're playing on your emotion that this is emotionally valuable. So it's the cultural value. It also reminded me of steroids. The whole conversation is about fraud. Why is Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens and Alex, why are they not in the Hall of Fame? Because of the idea that your accomplishments were supposed to be real.
They're synthetic.
It's not
diamonds.
Just a punishment, right? It's not supposedly just a punishment that you broke the rules. It was that the idea of fair competition. And so what I really enjoyed about this documentary is that across these different questions, across these different very disparate industries that we're talking about, whether we're talking about the housing market or baseball or diamonds or the Pentagon, this idea of fraud, this idea of authenticity, that something has to be real in order for it to maintain its value. And then the counter argument that if it means something to you, it still means something. To me, that felt like the surrender piece of it.
Yes.
And then I love the heel turns at the end of the documentary where you realize that, yes, to what you were saying earlier, De Beers is like, there's no stopping this, we got to get in on it. And then, our moral hero at the beginning of the film, Dusan Simic, the Serbian gemologist, is like, you know what? If nobody's going to listen to me, then I'm going supervillain. I'm going to make a diamond from the lab completely from scratch that is completely undetectable. That not only are you not going to be able, you will not be able to discern that this came out of a lab. I am going to perfect this technology that you're going to believe it came out of the earth.
Mm-hmm.
And the documentary ends, of course, obviously, spoiler alerts, with you just don't know. You don't know what is happening with his master plan. It just ends.
Yep.
And I thought that was, I don't know how I mean, I at first I thought like, okay, if you can't beat them, join them, or also this is what you get for not listening, or this is how supervillains are created. But also thinking that this is what happens when you don't have integrity. And what I was really upset about was that I was saying, am I actually agreeing with De Beers somehow in here? And the answer at first was yes, because I believe in ritual and I believe in those stories, and I think those things have to have value. But then I quickly caught myself and said, no. So I'm caught in the middle on this. I don't believe that if you ain't cheating, you ain't trying. But I also don't believe in, in the stories that these massive cartels are telling you, because they've got, literally a company like De Beers has blood on its hands.
Yeah. I mean, I think what is perhaps obvious, but I just realized as I'm thinking through what De Beers did in terms of launching their Lightbox brand, is not only is it another revenue stream, but they have wardened off or distinguished that if you buy a De Beers diamond, it in there, what they are saying to you is that a De Beers diamond now is 100% real, even though it isn't, because we know that the synthetics are flooding the market. But if they have a separate brand that is their synthetic brand, then sort of like the human logic there is that, but if I buy their real diamonds, then their real diamonds are real, even though they don't know that their real diamonds are real.
Yeah, it was very clear that De Beers was selling that the only thing we can do now at De Beers is to sell our name.
Yep.
So we're selling the authenticity of who we are. If you trust us, that the name brand is like a BMW or a Mercedes or something. We're not telling you what's in the car is real. We're telling you that our name can be trusted. It's all we've got left.
So I have a question for you, Howard, because one of my initial thoughts as I started watching this, because the first 20 minutes of the doc, it's very much about the origin of the De Beers marketing campaign. There's a lot of flashbacks to commercials that look like they're from the 80s, where it's like, a diamond is forever. And we're seeing all of the marketing materials and the creation of the story. And we're told, even by like Asha, like that the idea of the diamond was a decision that was made to market something and sell it to the public and create a story about why they would want it. And, here I am again with my parallels, but like one of my sort of soapboxy pet ideas is that you can sell anything to people. And in the sports world, you always hear when it comes to women's sports, well, people don't want women's sports. And I'm like, well, no one's ever De Beers it. No one's ever decided we're going to create a really cool story around it. We're going to create a place in the culture for why you would love it and connect with it. Then we're going to pour millions of dollars into a marketing campaign to say, here is where the place in the cultural story is for women's sports. And we do that but whenever you talk to marketing people who actually sell physical things, they will tell you that consumers don't tell you what they want. You just create something and you market it and you tell them what they want.
You tell them you have to have this.
Yes.
Where
do you fall on that? Do you think people, if there was enough investment in cultural storytelling, that you could sell anything to society, or is it more of a two-way street?
I think it's interesting because we've been around long enough that there are certain touchstones that we've been told matter. And then over time, we'll see if they last. Yeah. And it reminds me a little bit of what LeBron James is doing right now in the NBA. That, his generation, the LeBrons, the Kyries, the Kevin Durants, the James Hardens, the message being sent right now is that the individual player is far more important than the brand, right? Like, is there value in the Boston Celtics? Is there value in Duke and North Carolina and all these blue chips that we're talking about, which is the same thing as Mercedes, BMW, and De Beers? Is there value in this? Like, what happens when it doesn't matter? I mean, this is, to your point about women's sports, this was the Yukon Mystique. This was that there was one blue chip out there, and it's the one name that you had to have if you were going to be if you were a basketball player, if you were a young girl playing basketball and you wanted to go to college, UConn was the brand, right? Just like Kansas and UCLA and the rest of them are in the other sports. And so the question to me is you're right. How long does that mystique last? And can that mystique be created? Or does that mystique have to exist over time through experience?
Yes.
I tend to believe there has to be something that creates your interest. And I believe it's the latter. I think it has to exist over time. Otherwise, like, look at what's happening now. They keep trying to stuff the XFL down our throats and people just aren't buying it.
Yep.
There has to be something that tells you that this is valuable.
Yeah. Yeah, because I think what makes the De Beers diamond cultural story work is that it intrinsically makes sense, right? They're not, I'm trying to think of some wacky example, but they're not trying to say, like, commemorate your love with this anklet. I don't know, right? Like,
and Kate, and to your other point, and the diamond myth is 200 years old or more, right? Yeah. I mean, you're looking at this being, it's not like it happened in, 1975. Now, the marketing push raises the price. Yes. And those commercials are iconic, and those commercials they tell you this is what you have to have. And the one area where the marketing really does change your attitude is when you hit that sweet spot and you reach the cultural vein where you say, I gotta have this. Yeah. I have been told that this separates me from everybody else, or that this item is separate from all the other items. That piece is true. Yeah. But the diamond itself, we're going back to what, the 1700s?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that kind of like golden ratio of the perfect slogan, marketing campaign, slick storytelling combined with actually making sense and being useful or representative to the public is a very rare combination. I mean, we could probably name certain products, like Mercedes isn't just a popular status symbol in cars simply because of some sort of great German storytelling, but also because they're well made and I was going to say
that is the other piece of this, right? Yeah. The other piece is, and this is where the diamond story, as we wrap this up, where the diamond story is in trouble. There are certain things that are worth the money. Yes. There are certain things. There is a difference between driving a Kia and driving a BMW. It's better made. There are certain clothing, certain shoes, certain things. Now, my palate is nowhere near as refined enough that I can tell you the difference between a $10 bottle of wine and a $20,000 bottle of wine. That one, I can't go in that direction. But in terms of value, you do have to sell the idea that this is of unique quality. And where this documentary hits its sweet spot is this documentary is telling you that diamonds are not BMWs. They are not Mercedes. They are not the high quality. They are average run-of-the-mill stones that you are being told are important. Yep. And so whereas the synthetic piece of it was sort of interesting, the most damaging piece of it was that yes. You have been told all of these years that diamonds are really, really, really scarce, and they're not. They're not even special. You know what it reminds me of, Kate, as I will say goodbye to us for Meadowlarkers 68, it reminds me of lobster.
That's right.
When we were growing up, lobster was the great delicacy, but then you realize 50 years earlier, 100 years earlier, lobster was poor people's food.
Yep. In the South, they would feed it to slaves.
Exactly.
Yep.
Lobster is poor people's food. Why does
Was there a great marketing campaign? What happened? How did lobsters do this?
Where's the great, why is a lobster $70?
Right.
They're bottom feeders.
Literally. Do we know how?
And that is a great question, you know. Where is the marketing campaign? A lobster is forever. Right? Where is that? Do you have final thoughts, Kate Fagan, on Nothing Lasts Forever, a spectacular documentary now airing on Showtime?
No, I mean, I loved it, and I thought, you know, yes, it's about diamonds. I love peeks into industries that I am completely ignorant of, but on top of that, as we've discussed here, it is very metaphorical for so many other industries, but that we haven't had like deep dives into. So I think this was one of those docs where I was like, I would give it an A.
Yeah, same. For me, the only thing about this that I would say is that much like the other docs that we've talked about, there is one common thread that you get with really good docs, and that is really good gets. Whether it was FIFA Uncovered, whether it was Super League or this, they got really good gets. And
good access.
They really made it very entertaining. And it's only 87 minutes. You can zap through it pretty damn fast. So Amin El-Hassan never made He never made this scene, so we're gonna go without him. It was just Kate Fagan and myself. For Meadowlarkers 68, we will say goodbye. Next week, we will have another Meadowlarkers, and I think that number will just speak for itself.
Yeah. We'll just let that stand.
We'll just let Meadowlarkers 69 speak for itself. We will just see you next week.